Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to update on the continuing failure of GB News, which is a crass and thankfully misguided attempt to bring Fox News to Britain. After an early ratings plunge, the channel brought in Nigel Farage in an attempt to save it. Mr. Fix It. It has not gone well for them. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, not really discussed GB News that much. In fact, outside of that one time when I was discussing, the potential for boycotting advertisers on the channel, not really at all. Certainly not in the same way as I've discussed some other media outlets. And the main reason for this really is that they're not a news station. It's like, by that, I don't mean they just provide propaganda to further cement the control of shady billionaires over our society, because that could apply to several other outlets that I will still describe as news media. But GB News doesn't seem to even pretend to present the news. See, the way you do the news, if you want to spin it a particular way, is you explain what's happening in the world and then go and then present it in such a way as provides maybe misleading or with a particular spin on it. But they don't do that. It just seems to me that it's just a round table of political discussion. Commentary. Essentially, it does what I do, only I'm not shilling for anyone and making every effort to be honest and consistent. And I have a little bit of a rule as well about not really commentating on the commentators. See, I've been on YouTube in various guises for a while, for a few years, and I've always found it a bit unedifying when commentators discuss other commentators. It goes, it's absolutely ridiculous. Person A does a video on something. Okay, fine. Then person B goes, I'm going to do my commentary on person A's video about this thing. And then person B goes, what are you on about, mate? And then they do a response to that. The response back and forth. It's like trying to listen to a conversation by flicking from one channel to another. And you go, look, why didn't you just have a conversation with each other? Oh, is it because person B's got like 100 subscribers and they're trying to piggyback off person A who's got like 1 million? But if they have a significant influence, I think that's a different matter. At that point, you're not simply a commentator, because you are at least indirectly influencing policy. Therefore, you are a policy maker, even if it's not direct. And those policies influence our lives. For example, if anyone tries to do a commentary video on something I say, which a few people apparently have tried to do, again, piggybacking, because that's all they're doing. They're piggybacking for clicks because they've got nothing to talk about themselves. I don't influence policy. But if any policymakers or even would-be policymakers ever brought my thoughts into the mix, then that would be different. It would be entirely valid to question my methodology. So GB News is just commentary, and it's commentary that isn't even going very well. So why discuss it now? Well, it seems to be in a bit of a position of influence. Like, I would say malign influence, of course, but influence, we can agree at least. It can get senior government ministers to promote it, to feature it, to invite people to carefully selected press conferences. We know that after an initial bit of interest, the viewing figures bombed. Their headline star, Andrew Neil, then left for a 2-week holiday. Quite a while ago now. Hasn't been seen since. It was suggested that this was because the channel was failing hard and he was sick of the humiliation. Now, we don't know the real reason, but the channel then in desperation turned to Nigel Farage. Well, he doesn't even pretend to be a journalist. Andrew Neil is at least a journalist. He might not be speaking truth to power, but he's at least a journalist, a skilled one at that. Nigel Farage, no. And he was good for a bit of a ratings boost, but even that seems to have dropped off now. An article in The Express, which is very similar in terms of aims and content. Basically, The Express is the newspaper equivalent of GB News. Described the ratings disaster. They said that Farage's first show, which was entitled Farage, and as far as I could tell involved him drinking beer with someone airing their monstrous views, started off with 107,000 views on debut, they said. This was apparently quite good. I mean, I would consider that many views to be good, I suppose, for something like that, with so many channels available to watch these days. But Farage has over 1.5 million followers on Twitter. Could he not persuade a good chunk of them to have tuned in for his debut? Granted, not all of those followers will be based in the UK, and Russian bots probably don't watch telly anyway, but still. But to cut a long story short, the Express is reporting that the highest viewing count that channel received last week was 23,000. Now, for comparison, if I was doing it for my videos, I had a video get about 23,000 views last week. That was by far my worst performing video in the week. Of course, that's not best comparison because I'm not scheduling lots of content a day. It's 2 videos, which is quite a lot actually for what it is. Not everyone watches mine at the same time is what I mean. So at peak times, if you're going to talk about it as a comparison thing, at peak times I may have somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people watching within the space of an hour. Which, you know, so noontime particularly, that's when the other one comes out when a lot of people are asleep. So that one comes out when a lot of people are awake. That's like my peak viewing figures, between 10 and 15,000 at any one time, which is more comparable. And with the average viewing figures for GB News now down to 17,000 and falling, it was 18,000 the week before apparently, 17,000 last week, they're basically getting slightly more viewers than I do when I publish a video, which is probably the best way to compare. Yet the channel still gets to have a close relationship with policymakers. I'm not saying they're informing it directly, but they're influencing it. With comparable viewing figures to me, a one-man show on the internet. They have a dozen presenters. That's a lot of money pouring in. You know, they can interview policymakers. I couldn't even get a response, let alone an interview, with my local port authority for a video that I think is going to be coming out later today. If I've got the schedule right in my head. And that's why I think it's sort of newsworthy to discuss this, even though they're too embarrassing to discuss often. They aren't operating any sort of sensible business model. Can't be. It's like listening to the drunks down the pub. And I'm not going to say that this is why it's failing, because I remember when Big Brother first came out in this country. I just looked at it and thought to myself, why are people sat in their lounge being bored, watching other people sat in their lounge being bored? How is this entertaining? But apparently it was, so what do I know? The same may have applied to GB News. Maybe people found it entertaining. But it hasn't, apparently. And I actually wonder if the reason why isn't so much because it isn't entertaining to their target audience. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. No idea whether it is. Perhaps they just misjudged their target audience or thought it was in a different place. See, Nigel Farage's inclusion is a case in point. No sooner had Farage sauntered over to GB News to save them than he was attacking our lifeboat charity, the RNLI, for saving lives, because some of those lives would be migrant lives. The backlash was impressive. Hundreds of thousands of pounds been raised for them, both directly and indirectly, because someone set up a crowdfunder as a bit of a joke to buy a hovercraft that they were going to be naming after Farage to rub it in. It's raised over £120,000. There won't be a hovercraft. They did sort of say at the start, you know, it'll probably just be donated to the RNLI for what they need it for. We're probably not going to get a hovercraft named after Farage. Turns out they don't need one for the area that it's been raised for, but the money will still be going to good use in saving lives. But the point is that Farage misjudged the mood, and then he had to backtrack. The thing is that he knows that his anti-immigration message resonated during these last dark years of Brexit. A lot of people got behind him on it, you know, and he has taken that to mean that all those people who got behind his brand of xenophobia were in the same place as him, were of the same mind, but they're not. They're just loosely grouped. Because whereas Farage just seems to genuinely have no empathy at all, he's even attacking people fleeing from Afghanistan. Most of the people who supported him and his xenophobic stance don't actually hate foreigners. They're not hateful people. They just bought into the lie that migrants were taking jobs or putting pressure on local services because that made a logical sort of sense to them. None of which was true, of course. You know, without as many migrant workers, we've seen what happens now. We haven't suddenly seen the unemployment rate fall. We haven't suddenly seen people going, brilliant jobs for everyone. We've seen huge shortages in our supply chain. Massive shortages. Where's all the people to do those jobs then? Oh, they didn't exist. Okay. As for local services, foreign workers pay more in taxes than UK citizens. It's totally unfair. the NHS surcharge. So in addition to everything we pay, they pay the same thing for the equivalent wage, but they pay extra on top, and it's a lot extra as well. So actually getting rid of a lot of migrant workers means that we will put our local services under more pressure. People just thought, oh, more people, more pressure. More people, more money. The money's gone now. You know, they paid over the odds for those local services. There's now not enough money in the pot. But although people bought into those lies, and they were lies, they didn't want any harm to come to them. They didn't harbour any hatred for them. Some did, but not that many. They don't want to see children drowning in the sea. They don't want to see innocent Afghans being murdered. This is where there is a fundamental difference between Farage and some others involved in GB News and their target audience. It's a media outlet that has been set up to further radicalise a population that isn't actually as far down the path to radicalisation as they thought it was. It's a populist device to change us into, I don't even want to think what. You know, they're trying to brainwash us into a way of thinking, just like Fox News does in America. But it's like they've put on the advanced course when the target audience is still probably in need of the intermediate stages. And I think I'm quite pleased, really, that they're too dumb to realise that, you know, that they're missing the mark. Or if they do realise it, they just don't know how to recalibrate their sights. However, I'm always wary of celebrating the ham-fisted failures of those that I see as dangerous to society. Because people have done this in the past. I mean, in this country, people laughed at Farage. People laughed at Boris Johnson. That didn't work out too well for us, underestimating them in the end. People are laughing at the ineptitude of GB News. You know, but it's failing hard and it's still going. I don't know how it's doing for advertising revenue, but a lot of companies pulled out due to customer pressure. So I can't imagine that the slots for businesses who are still happy to advertise there are all that expensive. I mean, it's all done on an auction basis, not that many bidding for them. But as a business enterprise, it's failing. You know, the views are down, so the advertising revenue, even if they weren't getting companies boycotting it, just for the views they're getting, will be down. That means that those who funded it are still shelling out. Okay, you understand that a business takes time to establish itself, could take a few years. But the trajectory is one of never meeting financial independence, because it just goes down. It started off at a particular point and they might have thought that was a good point, and then it went down badly. Then they got Nigel Farage in, up a bit, and then down again. So what will happen then? It has to be one of three things, unless we assume that they just keep going with it and eventually it just trickles back upwards. But I don't think that's realistic. So three options, really. One, they will reevaluate, and someone with some brains and no morals will calibrate it for where the gammons actually are, and it will start doing its intended job of poisoning our society further. Two, they will carry on as they are, pumping the money in for whatever small gains in the political battles they think they're getting, in the hopes that just over time it gradually establishes itself. Or three, they will pull the plug and start again with a completely different outlet, a different format, with a different focus, but with the same aims. In the meantime, it continues to be a big budget venture, albeit with none of that budget actually on show, that is performing no better than a local media organisation. They try to claim to be a news channel, but don't actually carry out any journalism. They call themselves GB News, not UK News, you notice, potentially trying to think that they're going to last longer than the Union. They passed over their only journalist for Nigel Farage, the populist, and even that hasn't worked. But there we are, that's where they are now. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details, and until next time, I'll see you later.